I should have known the moment I saw the black envelope on the kitchen counter that my life was about to change. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, sealed with crimson wax and addressed in elegant script to Mr. Dante Moretti and guest. I held it between my fingers like it might burn me, which, knowing the world my employer inhabited, wasn't entirely impossible. I'd been working as Dante Moretti's housekeeper for 6 months. 6 months of polishing marble floors in a penthouse that overlooked the glittering chaos of the city. 6 months of preparing meals he rarely ate, arranging flowers he never noticed, and pretending I didn't hear the hushed phone conversations that echoed through the halls at midnight. 6 months of telling myself I was just the help, invisible, safe. I was wrong on both counts. Area. His voice cut through my thoughts like a blade through silk. I spun around, clutching the invitation against my chest, and found him standing in the doorway of his study. Dante Moretti. The man whose name made grown men flinch. The man whose dark eyes could strip away every defense I'd ever built. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin. His black hair pushed back from a face that could have been carved from stone. All sharp angles and dangerous beauty. But it was his eyes that held me captive. Dark as midnight, intense as a storm, and currently fixed on me with an expression I couldn't read. Mr. Moretti. I cleared my throat, trying to steady my voice. Your invitation arrived. I know. He moved toward me with the predatory grace of a man who'd never had to ask for anything twice. That's why I'm here. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. I pressed my spine against the counter as he stopped inches away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made my pulse race. Open it, he said softly. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. The invitation slid out, heavy cardstock embossed with gold lettering. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Isabella Romano and Vincent Castellano, the Castellanos. I whispered, recognizing the name from the fragments of conversation I'd overheard. Rivals, enemies, the family that controlled the south side of the city while Dante ruled the north. Indeed. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It's a power play. Vincent marrying into the Romano family to consolidate territories. He paused, his gaze dropping to my lips before returning to my eyes. I need you to come with me. I blinked. I'm sorry. A's my date. The world tilted slightly. Mr. Moretti, I'm your housekeeper. I can't. You can. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of dark hair from my face with unexpected gentleness. The touch sent electricity racing down my spine. You will. Why me? The question escaped before I could stop it. Something flickered in his eyes, something raw and almost vulnerable. Because everyone expects me to bring someone from my world. Someone predictable. Someone they can read, manipulate, or use against me. His thumb traced my jawline and I forgot how to breathe. You're different, Area. You see me but you don't see my empire. And that makes you the most dangerous weapon I could possibly wield. I'm not a weapon. No. His voice dropped to a whisper that felt like a caress. You're something far more valuable. You're real. I should have said no. Should have stepped away, maintained the careful distance I'd preserved for 6 months. But standing there with his hand against my skin and his eyes seeing straight through to my soul, I couldn't remember why boundaries had ever mattered. When is the wedding? I heard myself ask. Saturday night. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, transforming his face from intimidating to devastating. I'll have a dress delivered, something that will make every man in that room forget his own name. And what happens at this wedding? The smile faded, replaced by something colder. Something that reminded me exactly who and what Dante Moretti was. That depends entirely on Vincent Castellano. But one thing is certain, the moment you walk through those doors on my arm you'll be in my world. And my world, Area, doesn't let go easily. He stepped back then, breaking the spell that had wrapped around us. But as he turned to leave he paused in the doorway, looking back at me with eyes that held both warning and promise. Wear your hair down on Saturday, he said quietly. I want them to see exactly who you are. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the kitchen with a wedding invitation that felt like a death sentence and a racing heart that betrayed how much I wanted to accept it. I looked down at the crimson wax seal broken between my fingers, still warm from my grip. This was insane, dangerous, possibly suicidal, and yet as I traced the embossed letters on the invitation, I knew with absolute certainty that come Saturday night I would wear that dress, pin my hair down, and step into Dante Moretti's dark world, because for 6 months I'd been invisible. For one night I wanted to be seen, even if it destroyed me. The dress arrived on Thursday in a box that looked like it cost more than my entire year's salary. I stared at it on my bed for a full 10 minutes before I found the courage to lift the lid. Black tissue paper rustled as I peeled back the layers, and then, my breath caught. The gown was midnight blue silk that seemed to shimmer between darkness and light, cut in a style that would cling to every curve before falling in a waterfall of fabric to the floor. Elegant, sensual, dangerous, the kind of dress that made statements without uttering a single word. A note rested on top, written in Dante's sharp, masculine scrawl, "This is who you are. Don't hide it." I ran my fingers over the silk, my heart hammering. Who did he see when he looked at me? Because I'd spent my entire life trying to be invisible, the quiet girl who cleaned houses, kept her head down, and never asked questions that might get her hurt. But Dante saw something else. Something I wasn't sure I recognized. Area. I jumped, spinning to find Dante standing in my doorway. My tiny bedroom suddenly felt even smaller with him filling the space. All dark intensity and barely controlled power. You shouldn't be in here. I managed, clutching the dress against my chest like a shield. Staff quarters were off limits to him by his own rules. A boundary he'd never crossed until now. I know. He stepped inside anyway, closing the door behind him. But I needed to explain something before Saturday. My pulse raced as he moved closer. We'd barely spoken since Tuesday, though I'd felt his eyes on me constantly, watching, waiting, making me question every breath I took. The Castellanos are violent, he said quietly. Vincent especially. He'll see you as leverage against me. A weakness he can exploit. Then why bring me? I set the dress down carefully, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Why put me in danger? Because I need someone who doesn't belong to this world yet. His jaw tightened. Someone innocent enough that they won't see you coming. See me coming. Confusion flooded through me. Dante, what exactly am I supposed to do at this wedding? He studied me for a long moment, something conflicted flickering across his features. Then he reached out, his hand cupping my face with surprising tenderness. You're gonna be yourself, he said softly, beautiful, real, uncorrupted by the ugliness that surrounds me. And while everyone's watching you, wondering who you are and why I chose you. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. I'll be watching them, reading their tells, seeing which of Vincent's allies might be turned, which enemies might become friends. I'm a distraction. You're a revelation. His voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. Do you know how rare it is in my world to find something genuine? Something that hasn't been bought, sold, or corrupted. I'm not that special, I protested, even as heat bloomed under my skin where he touched me. That's exactly what makes you extraordinary. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. You don't know your own power, Area, but I do. And Saturday night everyone else will too. I should have pushed him away, should have demanded answers about what I was really walking into. But his proximity made thinking impossible, and the way he looked at me, like I was both salvation and damnation, wrapped in one impossible package, made me want things I had no business wanting. What if I can't do this? I whispered. What if I'm not strong enough? You've survived 6 months in my home, witnessing things you shouldn't see, hearing conversations you shouldn't hear, and you've never once asked for something you hadn't earned. His hand slid to the back of my neck, fingers tangling gently in my hair. You're stronger than you know. Stronger than I deserve. Dante? Saturday night will be dangerous. He continued, his voice rough with something that sounded almost like regret. I won't lie to you about that. But I swear on everything I am, I will keep you safe. No matter what happens. No matter what it costs me. The intensity in his eyes stole my breath. This wasn't the cold Mafia boss the world feared. This was a man stripped of armor, showing me something raw and real and terrifying in its vulnerability. Why does it matter so much? I asked. What I think of you. What I see. His jaw worked, a muscle ticking beneath the surface. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because when you look at me, you don't see the monster. You see the man I used to be. The man I could have been if I'd made different choices. His grip tightened slightly, desperate. And for 6 months I've been addicted to that lie. To pretending I'm still someone worth saving. My heart cracked open. You're not a lie. I'm not a hero either. I never asked you to be. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, hope, fear all tangled together. He leaned in, his lips hovering just above mine, close enough that I could feel his breath against my skin. Saturday, he whispered. After the wedding. Ask me anything you want to know about who I am, what I've done. I'll tell you the truth even if it makes you hate me. And if I don't hate you. His eyes darkened. Then God help us both. He released me then, stepping back before I could close the distance between us. The loss of his touch felt like winter after summer. Wear the dress, he said from the doorway, his voice once again controlled and commanding. And Area, whatever happens Saturday night, don't trust anyone except me. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with a dress that promised transformation and a warning that felt like prophecy. 2 days until the wedding. 2 days until I stepped into hell wearing midnight blue silk and pretending I belonged there. 2 days until I discovered whether Dante Moretti was my salvation or my destruction. I picked up the dress, holding it against my body as I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, and for the first time in my life, I wanted to meet her. The Castellano estate rose from the hillside like a Gothic monument to wealth and violence, all iron gates and marble columns illuminated by hundreds of flickering torches. As Dante's car wound up the driveway, I pressed my palms against the midnight blue silk covering my thighs, trying to steady my racing heart. You're trembling. Dante's voice was quiet, but his hand found mine in the darkness of the backseat, his fingers lacing through mine with unexpected gentleness. I'm terrified, I admitted. Good. He turned to face me, and in the dancing light from the torches, he looked almost otherworldly. Dangerous beauty wrapped in a perfectly tailored black suit. Fear keeps you sharp, alert. But Area, his thumb traced circles on my palm. You were born for this moment. Trust me. The car stopped. A valet opened my door, and suddenly the night air was alive with music, laughter, and the underlying current of tension that marked gatherings where enemies pretended to be friends. Dante appeared at my side, offering his arm with old-world courtesy that contrasted sharply with the lethal grace in every movement. Ready? No, absolutely not. But I placed my hand on his arm anyway, feeling the coiled strength beneath the expensive fabric. As I'll ever be. We walked through doors that opened like jaws into a ballroom that belonged in a fairy tale or a nightmare. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto marble floors. Women in designer gowns glittered like jewels. Men in suits that cost more than cars clustered in corners, their eyes calculating predatory. And every single one of them turned to stare as Dante Moretti entered with an unknown woman on his arm. The whispers started immediately. I felt them crawl across my skin like insects. Who is she? Where did he find her? Does she know what he is? Dante's hand covered mine, warm and steady. Breathe, he murmured against my ear. Let them look, let them wonder. You're the most beautiful woman in this room, and they know it. I wasn't sure about beautiful, but I definitely felt exposed. The dress Dante had chosen did exactly what he'd intended. It made me impossible to ignore. Every eye followed us as we moved deeper into the crowd. Dante Moretti. A voice cut through the music, smooth as poison. I'm surprised you accepted our invitation. The man approaching us was handsome in a cold, calculated way. Blonde hair slicked back, blue eyes like chips of ice, and a smile that never reached above his teeth. He wore a white tuxedo that marked him as the groom. Vincent Castellano. Vincent. Dante's voice remained neutral, but I felt the tension coil through his body. Congratulations on your wedding. Vincent's gaze slid to me, lingering in a way that made my skin crawl. And who might this exquisite creature be? I don't recall seeing her at any of our previous gatherings. My private life remains private, Dante said coolly, pulling me fractionally closer. I trust you'll respect that. Something dangerous flashed in Vincent's eyes. Of course, though I must say she seems rather innocent for your usual tastes. Tell me, darling. He addressed me directly now, deliberately excluding Dante. Do you know what kind of man you're with tonight? I felt Danny tense beside me, but before he could intervene, I met Vincent's gaze with a calmness I didn't feel. I know exactly who he is. Vincent's smile widened. Do you? How fascinating then perhaps. Vincent. A woman in white appeared at his side, her dark hair swept up in an elaborate style, her smile brittle as glass. The bride Isabella Romano, though she looked more like a prisoner than a blushing newlewed. Our guests are waiting for the first dance. Of course, my love. Vincent's tone dripped with false affection, but I caught the way Isabella flinched almost imperceptibly at his touch. Dante, enjoy the evening. I'm sure we'll have time to talk later. As the couple glided away toward the dance floor, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You did well, Dante murmured, guiding me toward the periphery of the room. Vincent was testing you and you didn't break. Scares me more than you do, I admitted quietly. He should. Dante's jaw tightened as he watched Vincent spin his new bride across the floor with possessive brutality disguised as romance. Vincent doesn't just want power, he wants to own people. Break them. Make them into objects for his collection. Is that what he's doing to her? Isabella, yes. The single word held volumes of disgust. The Romanos sold their daughter to the Castellanos to avoid a war. She had no choice in the matter. I watched the bride's forced smile, the way her body remained rigid even as she moved through the practiced steps of the dance, and something inside me ached. That's horrible. That's our world. Dante turned to me, his expression unreadable. Still think you know what kind of man I am, Aria? Because I've attended weddings like this before. Celebrations of transactions disguised as love. And I've never once intervened. Because you couldn't, I said softly, surprising myself with my certainty. Not without starting a war that would kill more people than it saved. He stared at me for a long moment, something raw and vulnerable flickering across his features. How do you do that? Do what? See through the darkness to whatever light might be left inside me. Before I could answer, a commotion erupted near the entrance. The music faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. The air itself seemed to freeze. Because standing in the doorway, flanked by armed men in black suits, was someone I didn't recognize, but Dante clearly did. All the blood drained from his face. No, he whispered, the word barely audible. Not here, not now, Dante. I gripped his arm, alarmed by the panic in his voice, an emotion I'd never heard from him before. Who is that? He didn't answer, couldn't answer. Because the man in the doorway was striding across the ballroom floor directly toward us. His eyes locked on Dante with an intensity that made my breath catch. And then, just feet away from Vincent and Isabella, who had frozen mid-dance, the man stopped. His gaze shifted from Dante to me, and Vincent Castellano's eyes went wide with shock so profound he actually stumbled backward. Vincent breathed, staring at me like I'd materialized from his worst nightmare. That's impossible. You're supposed to be dead. The stranger smiled, cold and terrible. Yes, Vincent, we were all supposed to be dead, weren't we? But it seems my daughter survived after all. The world tilted violently, my daughter. The words echoed in my skull as every eye in the ballroom turned to me, the unknown girl in the midnight blue dress who apparently wasn't unknown at all. And Dante's grip on my arm tightened like a vise as he whispered 3 words that shattered everything I thought I knew. What have I done? Time fractured into jagged pieces. The ballroom spun. Voices crashed over me in waves I couldn't process. And through it all, one truth burned through the chaos: my daughter. I stumbled backward, but Dante's arm wrapped around my waist, holding me upright even as his own world clearly crumbled. You're lying. Vincent's voice had lost its smooth confidence, replaced by something raw and dangerous. Aria Romano died 20 years ago in the fire. Everyone knows that. The entire Romano family was wiped out except for Isabella's branch. Aria Romano, I whispered, the name foreign on my tongue. My name was Aria, just Aria. No last name, no family, no history before the orphanage where I'd spent my childhood and the series of menial jobs that followed. The stranger, my supposed father, moved closer and I saw his face properly for the first time. Dark hair threaded with silver, strong features that carried the weight of decades spent in shadows, and eyes, God, his eyes were the same shade as mine. Deep brown flecked with gold that caught the light. You have your mother's face, he said quietly, something like grief cracking through his controlled expression. I'd know you anywhere, Kara. Even if I'd believed you dead for 2 decades. Stop. The word tore from my throat. I don't know you, I don't know any of this. My name is Aria Clark. I grew up in St. Catherine's orphanage. I have no family, no past, nothing. Because we made sure of it. Vincent had recovered his composure, though fury burned beneath the surface. When we set that fire, when we eliminated the Romano bloodline before they could challenge our territorial expansion, we were thorough, or so we thought. The room erupted. Isabella gasped. Guests whispered frantically. And Dante released me like I'd burned him, his face a mask of horror and realization. You knew. I breathed, understanding crashing through me like ice water. When you hired me, when you brought me into your home, you knew who I was. Note. His voice was hoarse. I swear to you, Aria, I didn't, but you suspected. My father's voice cut through, cold as winter. Didn't you, Moretti? When a girl with my daughter's eyes appeared in your city 6 months ago. When she needed work and you, so conveniently, hired her as your housekeeper, kept her close, kept her safe, kept her ignorant. His smile was terrible. All while you decided what to do with her. Every word was a knife. Every revelation a wound. Dante. I turned to him, needing him to deny it. Needing him to tell me this was madness, that nothing my father said was true. But the guilt written across his face was answer enough. I thought you might be connected to the Romanos. He admitted, his voice breaking on each word. The resemblance to old photographs was too strong to ignore. But I didn't know for certain. And I didn't know about the fire, about Vincent's involvement. Liar. Vincent's hand moved toward his jacket, toward the weapon I knew he carried. You've been planning this from the start. Bringing Lorenzo Romano's daughter to my wedding, making me confess to murder in front of witnesses. I planned nothing? Dante's roar silenced the room. I brought Aria here because I'm a fool who wanted her to see my world. Because after 6 months of watching her move through my home like sunlight through darkness, I convinced myself she might choose to stay in it. Choose me. His laugh was bitter. I never imagined her father would stage a resurrection at the same fucking wedding. My father, Lorenzo Romano, studied Dante with calculating eyes. You care for her. That's irrelevant. Eyes it. Lorenzo turned to me, his expression softening fractionally. Aria, Kara, I know this is overwhelming, but you need to understand what you've stumbled into. The Romanos and Castellanos have been at war for generations. 20 years ago, Vincent's father ordered your mother, your siblings, and you killed to prevent my family from challenging his empire. You survived only because your nanny smuggled you out before the fire started. She placed you in that orphanage under a new name, and then she disappeared. I assume Vincent had her silenced. Vincent's silence was confirmation enough. I've spent 2 decades searching for you, Lorenzo continued, his voice rough with emotion, following rumors, chasing ghosts, and 3 months ago, I received photographs, you working in Donnie Moretti's penthouse, my daughter alive, living under the protection of my longtime ally, or so I'd hoped. Ailey. Dante's bitter laugh cut through the tension. Is that what you call it? You abandoned our alliance 5 years ago, Lorenzo. Disappeared without a trace. Left the rest of us to navigate the power vacuum your absence created. I was searching for my child. While the rest of us were dying, the 2 men faced each other like wolves circling for dominance, and I stood between them, a girl with no past who'd suddenly been handed a heritage drenched in blood and violence. Enough. Isabella's voice, quiet but firm, cut through the masculine posturing. She moved forward, still in her wedding gown, looking at me with eyes that held recognition and something like pity. You're my cousin, Aria. We played together as children before the fire. I was 7. You were 5. You don't remember, but I do. You had a stuffed rabbit named Luna that you carried everywhere. A memory flickered, not solid, more like smoke. Soft fur under my fingers. A child's laughter. The smell of roses in summer. I don't. I pressed my hands to my temples, overwhelmed. This can't be real. But it is, Vincent said, his voice deadly calm now, which creates quite the problem. Because you, Aria Romano, are a living witness to my family's crimes, a threat to everything I've built. And threats. His hand finally emerged from his jacket, revealing the gun I'd known was coming. Must be eliminated. The weapon rose. Time slowed. And 3 things happened simultaneously. Dante lunged in front of me, his body a shield. Lorenzo's men drew their own weapons, creating a standoff. And I realized with terrifying clarity that the girl I'd been, quiet, invisible Area Clark, had died the moment I walked through those doors. You won't touch her. Dante growled, his voice carrying the full weight of his reputation. Not while I'm breathing. Vincent smiled. That can be arranged. The first shot shattered the crystal chandelier above us, and the wedding reception became a battlefield. Glass rained from the ceiling like deadly diamonds. Dante's arm locked around my waist, dragging me down as gunfire erupted across the ballroom. Screams tore through the air. Tables overturned, expensive gowns scattered across the marble floor as guests dove for cover. And through it all, Vincent Castellano stood at the center of the chaos, his weapon aimed directly at where Dante shielded me. Move! Dante's command was absolute. He half carried me toward the service corridors, bullets whining past us close enough that I felt the displaced air. Behind us, Lorenzo's men engaged Vincent's security in a firefight that transformed the elegant ballroom into a war zone. We crashed through a door into the kitchen, where staff scrambled in terror. Dante didn't slow, his hand crushing mine as he pulled me through the maze of stainless steel and steam. His other hand had produced a gun from somewhere. I hadn't even seen him draw it. The east exit. He muttered, more to himself than me. It opens onto the gardens. If we can reach the cars. Dante! My father's voice echoed from behind us. This way. We spun. Lorenzo stood in a secondary doorway, flanked by two of his men. Blood stained his shirt sleeve, but his eyes were clear and focused. I have vehicles waiting, Lorenzo said. But we need to move now. Vincent will have the entire estate locked down within minutes. Dante hesitated, his jaw working as he calculated impossible odds. Trust the man he'd once called ally but hadn't seen in 5 years. Or forge ahead alone with me. His housekeeper turned Romano, heir who he'd inadvertently placed in mortal danger. Go with him. I said quietly, surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite the terror flooding my veins. Dante, please. He's my father. Something shattered behind Dante's eyes. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand that people are dying out there because of me. Because of who I am. Whatever my father's crimes, whatever yours, right now he's offering us a way out. I gripped his hand tighter. So we take it. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd refuse. Then he nodded sharply and we ran toward Lorenzo, toward the unknown, toward whatever future waited beyond this nightmare. Lorenzo's men led us through servant passages I hadn't known existed, down stone staircases that descended into the estate's foundations. The sounds of gunfire faded to dull thuds above us, muffled by layers of earth and ancient architecture. Where are we going? I gasped, my heels clicking against stone even as I struggled to keep pace. Tunnels. Lorenzo answered without slowing. The Castellanos aren't the only family with secrets buried in their foundations. These passages connect to the old wine cellars and exit half a mile from the main house. Convenient. Dante muttered darkly. I've been planning for this confrontation for 20 years. Lorenzo said. I don't leave things to chance. We emerged into a circular chamber lit by battery-powered lanterns. Black SUVs waited in an underground parking area that looked more like a bunker than a garage. Lorenzo's men moved with military precision, checking weapons, scanning for threats. Get in. Lorenzo commanded, opening the rear door of the lead vehicle. I climbed inside, Dante sliding in beside me. Lorenzo took the front passenger seat. The engines roared to life, and we surged forward into a tunnel that stretched into darkness. Only when the estate's lights disappeared behind us did I allow myself to breathe. Dante's hand still gripped mine, his thumb moving in unconscious circles against my palm. I looked at him in the dim interior light and saw a man balanced on a razor's edge between control and chaos. You lied to me, I said quietly, the words I'd been holding back finally escaping. For 6 months. I never lied. His voice was raw. I just didn't tell you a truth I wasn't certain of myself. You suspected. I suspected many things. He turned to face me fully, his eyes blazing with emotion. I suspected you might be connected to the Romanos. I suspected you were more than you appeared. But what I knew, what I was absolutely certain of, was that you were the first real thing I'd encountered in a decade. And I was selfish enough to keep you close rather than risk losing you to a truth that might make you hate me. I don't hate you. The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. I should. By every rational measure, I should hate both of you for dragging me into this nightmare. But I don't. Lorenzo shifted in the front seat, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. That will change, Kara. Once you know what we've done, what we are, this world doesn't allow for innocence. Then maybe I was never as innocent as you both believe, I said, surprised by my own defiance. Maybe you don't get to decide what I can or can't handle. Silence filled the vehicle, broken only by the hum of the engine and the rustle of tires against pavement. She has her mother's fire. Lorenzo said finally, something like pride in his voice. Gabriella never backed down from a fight either. Tell me about her. I said. About my mother, my family, everything you kept from me. And as we drove through the night toward whatever sanctuary Lorenzo had prepared, he began to speak. Stories of a woman who'd ruled the Romano family with intelligence and grace, of siblings I'd never known, an older brother who'd been training to take over the empire, a younger sister who'd loved music and laughter. of a life that had been stolen from me in flames and bullets and lies. With every word, Arya Clark dissolved a little more, and Arya Romano, daughter of shadows, heir to blood and power, began to take her place. But as dawn broke over the horizon and our convoy pulled up to a fortified mansion in the countryside, I caught Dante watching me with an expression that made my heart clench, because he wasn't looking at an heir or a weapon or a revelation. He was looking at a woman he knew he was losing. And despite everything, despite the lies and danger and impossible complications, I wasn't sure I was ready to let him go. "We're here," Lorenzo announced as the gates swung open. "Welcome home, Arya." Home. The word felt foreign and familiar all at once, and as I stepped out of the car into the morning light, I realized that everything I'd been was gone. Now I had to decide what I would become. Lorenzo's safe house was beautiful in the way fortresses often are, all stone walls and iron gates disguised as Mediterranean elegance. Inside, it smelled of coffee and old leather and the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. I stood in the grand foyer, still wearing the midnight blue dress now torn at the hem and stained with dust, and felt like an imposter in someone else's life. Arya. Lorenzo approached with a woman at his side, older, elegant, with kind eyes that immediately catalogue every detail of my appearance. "This is Sophia. She'll help you get settled. We'll talk after you've rested." I don't want to rest. The exhaustion pressing against my bones was undeniable, but so was the need for answers. "I want the truth, all of it." Lorenzo exchanged a glance with Dante, who'd been unnaturally quiet since we'd arrived. "Very well, my study. 10 minutes. They disappeared down a corridor, leaving me with Sophia, who smiled gently. "Come, Kara. Let's at least get you out of that dress and into something comfortable. The truth will still be waiting." She led me upstairs to a bedroom that could have been torn from a luxury magazine, cream walls, silk curtains, a bed large enough to get lost in. Clothes waited in the wardrobe, all in my size, all clearly expensive. "Your father has been preparing for your return for a long time," Sophia said softly, helping me out of the ruined gown. "I never stopped believing you were alive. It didn't look very hard," I said, the bitterness surprising me. "I was in the same city for 6 months, working for one of his associates. Sometimes the things we're searching for are hidden in plain sight precisely because we'd never think to look there." She handed me simple black pants and a soft cashmere sweater. "And sometimes, Kara, the universe puts us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't understand why." I dressed quickly, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection. Same brown eyes, same dark hair, same face I'd seen every morning for 25 years, but not the same woman. 10 minutes later, I pushed open the door to Lorenzo's study and found both men waiting, my father behind a massive desk, Dante standing by the window like he was contemplating escape. "Sit," Lorenzo said, gesturing to a chair. "Please." I remained standing. Why did the Castellanos want us dead? Why was an entire family worth murdering? Lorenzo's expression hardened. Territory, resources, power. The Romanos controlled the northern ports, which meant we controlled the flow of certain goods into the city. Vincent's father wanted that power, so he eliminated the competition, by killing children, by eliminating threats. He corrected, though disgust colored his voice. "In this world, bloodlines matter. While any Romano lived, we could rebuild, reclaim. So he tried to erase us completely, but I survived. You survived." Lorenzo's voice softened. "Because your nanny Maria loved you more than she feared death. She got you out, gave you a new identity, and sacrificed herself to keep you hidden." The weight of that sacrifice pressed against my chest. A woman I couldn't remember had died to keep me alive, and now, I looked between them. Now that I'm not hidden anymore. Now that Vincent knows I exist. Now, Dante said quietly from the window, "You're the most dangerous person in this city. Because you're not just a Romano. You're a Romano with no blood on your hands, no crimes to hold over you, no leverage to exploit. You're clean, Arya. And in our world, clean means powerful. I don't want power. It doesn't matter what you want." Lorenzo leaned forward. "You're my only living heir. The Romano territories, businesses, resources, they're all yours by right, and with them comes the responsibility to make a choice." "What choice?" "Revenge." The word hung in the air like smoke. "Vincent Castellano murdered your family, stole your childhood, tried to kill you again tonight. You can walk away, disappear again, live a quiet life somewhere far from all of this." He paused. "Or you can take your birthright and make him pay for what he did." My heart hammered. "You want me to start a war? I want you to finish one that should have ended 20 years ago." "No." Dante moved away from the window, his voice sharp. "Lorenzo, you can't ask this of her. She's not what?" Lorenzo's eyes flashed. "Not strong enough. Not ruthless enough. Not broken enough by this world to want justice. Not responsible for your war." Dante's control finally cracked. "You want revenge against the Castellanos. Fine. But don't dress it up as justice and dump it on your daughter's shoulders. She doesn't owe you that. And what does she owe you, Moretti?" Lorenzo rose slowly, dangerously. "You who kept her identity from her. Who brought her to that wedding like a lamb to slaughter." "I was protecting her. By making her your housekeeper. By keeping her isolated and ignorant. By keeping her alive." The two men faced each other across the desk, decades of alliance and betrayal crackling between them like lightning. "Stop." My voice cut through the tension. Both of you, stop treating me like I'm something fragile that will shatter if you look at me wrong. I'm not a weapon for you to wield, Father. And I'm not a victim who needs protecting, Dante. I moved to stand between them, drawing strength from somewhere deep I hadn't known existed. I'm a woman who just discovered her entire life was built on lies and ash. So here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna take 24 hours. I'm gonna think. And then I'm going to decide what I want, not what either of you want from me. My choice. My consequences. Lorenzo studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You truly are your mother's daughter. Good? I held his gaze. Because apparently she was someone worth killing. That means she was someone worth remembering too. I turned and walked out before either of them could respond, my hands shaking but my spine straight. Behind me I heard Lorenzo say quietly, "You love her." And Dante's response, barely audible, "God help me." Yes. The words followed me up the stairs like ghosts. And I realized that whatever I decided tomorrow, nothing would ever be simple again. I didn't sleep. How could I, when every time I closed my eyes I saw fire and heard screams I couldn't remember, but somehow knew had once been real? Dawn found me on the terrace overlooking the gardens, wrapped in a blanket against the morning chill. The world looked peaceful from here, roses blooming despite the autumn cold, birds singing their mindless songs, no indication that miles away a war was brewing with me at the center. You should be resting. I didn't turn at Dante's voice. You should be sleeping too. I've forgotten how. He moved to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel his warmth but not quite touching. I spent all night trying to figure out what to say to you. How to explain. How to make you understand. Understand what? That you suspected who I was and kept it from me. That every conversation, every moment we shared, was built on secrets. No, his voice roughened. That every conversation, every moment we shared was real despite the secrets. That you became the only real thing in my life precisely because you didn't know who you were. Because when you looked at me, you saw me, not my empire, not my reputation, not what I could do for the Romano bloodline. I finally turned to face him. He looked wrecked, shadows under his eyes, hair disheveled, still wearing yesterday's blood-stained shirt. Vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. Tell me the truth, I said quietly. All of it. When did you first suspect? He exhaled slowly. 3 months before I hired you. A contact showed me photographs from the orphanage's old records. They were doing renovations and found archived files. One image stood out. A 5-year-old girl with Lorenzo Romano's eyes and Gabriella's smile. The resemblance was unmistakable. So you tracked me down. I made inquiries. Learned you were working 3 jobs just to afford a room in the worst part of the city. Learned you had no family, no protection. No idea who you really were. His jaw tightened. And I realized that if I'd made the connection, eventually someone else would too. Vincent's people maybe. Or Lorenzo's enemies who'd love to use you against him. So you hired me. So I brought you into my home where I could keep you safe while I figured out what to do. He turned to face me fully. But then you started rearranging the flowers in the entryway every Monday. And you'd hum while you cooked. Old songs I didn't recognize. And you'd leave books open on tables with passages underlined, like you were having conversations with dead authors. And slowly, Aria, you became more important than any plan I'd made. My heart squeezed. What were you gonna do? Originally, reunite you with Lorenzo. Step back, let you claim your birthright with your father's guidance. His laugh was bitter. I told myself I was being noble, selfless. But the truth is I was a coward who couldn't face losing you, so I kept postponing the inevitable. And then Lorenzo showed up at that wedding, and every choice I should have made crashed down at once. You should have told me. I know. I deserve to know who I was. I know that too. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away and cupped my face in his hands. I have no excuse good enough, no apology profound enough. I kept your truth from you because I'm a selfish bastard who wanted to keep you in my world a little longer. And now, his thumb brushed across my cheekbone. Now I've destroyed any chance I had of you choosing to stay. Dante? Don't. His voice cracked. Don't forgive me yet. Not until you hear everything. Not until you know exactly what kind of man fell in love with you. My breath caught. Yes. The word was simple. Absolute. I love you, Aria Romano. I love your strength and your gentleness and the way you see good in things most people would call irredeemable. I love how you hum off, key and dog, yearbook pages and rearrange flowers like you're creating tiny works of art. I love that you survived everything this world threw at you and still managed to stay kind. He paused, pain flickering across his features. But love doesn't erase what I've done. What I am. What I'll have to do if you choose your father's path. What do you mean? If you take your birthright, if you decide to challenge the Castellanos, there will be war. Real war. People will die, lots of people. And I'll be right there beside you doing terrible things in your name. Because that's what men like me do. We destroy. And the people we love most often get caught in the crossfire. I stared at him, seeing both the man who'd sheltered me and the monster he believed himself to be. And I realized something that should have terrified me but instead felt like truth. I'm not afraid of what you are, I said softly. I'm afraid of what I might become. His eyes widened slightly. Aria, I spent 6 months watching you, Dante, seeing how you moved through your world. And I never saw a monster. I saw a man making impossible choices in a system designed to punish weakness. I saw someone who protected his people, honored his word, and tried, even when it was hard, to be better than his circumstances demanded. That doesn't make me good. No. I covered his hands with mine. But it makes you human. And right now, that's more than anyone else has offered me. He stared at me like I'd performed a miracle or spoken heresy, maybe both. Then, slowly, he leaned forward until his forehead touched mine. What are you going to do? He whispered. Tomorrow, when you have to choose. I closed my eyes, breathing him in expensive cologne mixed with gunpowder and coffee and something uniquely Dante. I don't know yet, I admitted. But whatever I choose, I need to know one thing. Will you stay? Even if I walk away from all of this, even if I choose not to be Area Romano. His hands tightened on my face. I'll stay as long as you'll have me, in whatever capacity you'll allow, even if it's just. He swallowed hard. Even if it's just as the man who loved you and let you go. Good. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze directly. Because I'm gonna need someone who sees all of me, Area Clark and Area Romano, and loves both versions anyway. I do, he said simply. God help me, I do. And there, on the terrace as dawn broke over a world that would never be simple again, Dante Moretti kissed me. Gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid I'd shatter or disappear. But I kissed him back with all the confusion and fear and impossible hope tangled in my chest. And the kiss deepened into something desperate and real and completely ours. When we finally broke apart, the sun had risen fully, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. 24 hours. I whispered against his lips. 24 hours. He agreed, and then I would decide who I wanted to be. But for this moment, this single stolen moment, I allowed myself to just be Area, held by the man who'd seen me before I'd seen myself. It would have to be enough. The 24 hours passed like years and seconds simultaneously. I spent them walking the grounds, reading files Lorenzo provided about the Romano family history, and staring at photographs of people I should have known. My mother's elegant smile, my brother's serious eyes, my sister's wild curls, ghosts of a life stolen. Sophia brought me food I barely touched. Lorenzo checked on me with careful respect for my space. And Dante haunted the edges of my awareness like a shadow I could feel but not quite see. As sunset painted the sky in shades of fire, I finally knew what I had to do. I found them both in Lorenzo's study, my father reviewing documents, Dante standing at his customary position by the window. They looked up as I entered, and I saw the same question in both their eyes. Who have you decided to become? I need you to understand something first, I said without preamble. I'm angry at both of you, at Vincent Castellano, at a world where children die for their parents' choices, at myself for being comfortable in ignorance while people suffered. I took a breath. But anger alone isn't enough to build a life on. Lorenzo set down his pen slowly. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm not you, father. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life consumed by revenge. I'm not going to become what the Castellanos made you into, a man so focused on the past that he can't see the present. I moved further into the room, but I'm also not going to walk away and pretend none of this happened. The Romanos were slaughtered. Maria died protecting me. People are still dying in the wars you and Vincent wage over territories and pride. Then what do you propose? Dante asked quietly. I propose we end it. I looked between them. Not with more violence, not with another generation of bloodshed, but by exposing Vincent for what he is, a murderer who killed an entire family including children. Let the truth destroy him. Let the other families decide if that's the kind of man they want leading them. Lorenzo's expression darkened. You think the truth matters to people like us? The families know what Vincent did. They don't care as long as he maintains order and profits. Then we make them care. I pulled out my phone, holding it up. During the wedding, while everyone was fighting, I recorded something. Vincent admitting to the fire, to ordering the murders. His exact words were, "We're thorough when we eliminated the Romano bloodline." Both men froze. You recorded that? Dante breathed. In the middle of a firefight, you thought to document a confession. I thought about Maria, I said simply. About my mother and siblings. About all the people whose deaths were never acknowledged. And I realized that silence is how men like Vincent win. So yes, I recorded it. And now we're going to release it to every family, every news outlet, every corner of this world that pretends to have honor while enabling monsters. Lorenzo stared at me like he'd never seen me before. That will start a war. Good. My voice was steady. Because some wars need to be fought. But I'm not fighting with guns and blood. I'm fighting with truth, with witnesses, with evidence that can't be buried or burned. Vincent will come after you with everything he has. Dana warned. I know. I met his gaze. That's why I need both of you beside me. Not to wage war, but to stand as witnesses that the Romano family still exists. That what he didn't work, that justice, even delayed, eventually finds everyone. Silence stretched between us, heavy with possibility and danger. Then Lorenzo smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time since I'd met him. You're not what I expected, cara mia. You're better. Does that mean you'll help? It means I'll follow your lead. He stood, moving around the desk to face me properly. You want to end this through truth instead of violence. Then we'll try it your way, and if it doesn't work, His expression hardened. Then we'll try mine. I nodded, accepting the compromise. Fair enough. And you? I turned to Dante. Will you stand with me even if it means going against everything your world believes in? He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just inches away. I told you I'd stay as long as you'd have me, in whatever capacity you'd allow. His hand found mine, fingers lacing together. You want to burn Vincent's empire with nothing but truth and courage. Then I'll bring the gasoline and the matches. Whatever you need, area, wherever this leads. Something in my chest loosened, not quite relief, but close enough. It leads into danger, you understand that? I've been in danger my whole life. He raised our joined hands, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. But I've never had something worth dying for. Now I do. The words should have frightened me. Instead, they felt like coming home. Then we moved forward. I said, looking at both of them. Tomorrow we release the recording. We expose Vincent. We let the families decide what honor means to them. And we prepare for whatever comes next. Lorenzo moved to his computer, already strategizing. We'll need to coordinate the release carefully. Multiple platforms simultaneously so Vincent can't suppress it. And we'll need protection. He'll strike back the moment this goes public. I'll handle security, Dante said. My men have been loyal through worse. And I'll handle the narrative, I added. People need to understand this isn't just about revenge. It's about accountability. About refusing to let powerful men erase their crimes just because they can. We worked through the night planning, coordinating, preparing for the storm we were about to unleash. And somewhere around 3 a.m., as Lorenzo stepped out to make calls and Dante and I remained in the study, he pulled me into his arms. You're magnificent? He murmured against my hair, terrifying and magnificent. I'm scared. I admitted into his chest. Good fear keeps you sharp. He tilted my chin up, his dark eyes serious. But Arya, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever Vincent does in retaliation, you changed me. You showed me that there are things worth fighting for beyond territory and power. That's not nothing. It's not enough either. I touched his face, memorizing the lines and angles. When this is over, if we survive, I need to know you won't go back to being the man who kept secrets. Who made decisions for me instead of with me. I promise. The words were simple. Absolute, no more secrets, no more lies. Whatever we are, whatever we become, we do it together. As equals. Then kiss me, I whispered. Because tomorrow everything changes. He did, and in that kiss was everything we hadn't said, fear and hope and desperate, impossible love tangled together in a way that transcended sense or safety. When dawn broke over the horizon, we released the recording, and the world exploded. The recording went viral within hours. Vincent Castellano's voice, smooth, arrogant, admitting to mass murder, played on every news channel, every social media platform, every dark corner of the internet where men like him thought they were untouchable. We were thorough when we eliminated the Romano bloodline. The words echoed across the city like a death knell. By noon, 3 major families had issued statements condemning the Castellanos. By evening, federal investigators announced they were reopening cold cases related to the fire. And by midnight, Vincent's empire was crumbling under the weight of truth he'd never expected to face. But empires don't fall quietly. I stood in Lorenzo's safe house, watching the news coverage on multiple screens. When the first attack came, the windows exploded inward in a shower of glass. I hit the floor as Dante threw his body over mine, his weapon already drawn. Lorenzo's men returned fire from strategic positions they'd taken hours ago, prepared for exactly this inevitability. Get her to the bunker, Lorenzo roared from across the room. But I wasn't running. Not anymore, no. I pushed against Dante's protective hold. We stand here. We show them we're not afraid. Arya, this isn't the time for bravery. This is exactly the time. I grabbed his face, making him look at me. If we hide, if we act like victims, then Vincent wins. But if we stand in front of those cameras showing the world that the Romanos are still here, still fighting, still alive, then we win. Understanding flickered in his eyes. You want to use this attack? I want to show everyone watching that we expected it. That we're ready for it. That Vincent's only answer to truth is more violence, and that makes our case for us. Dante stared at me for 1 heartbeat. 2, then he smiled, sharp and dangerous and proud. You're brilliant and insane. I learned from the best. He kissed me hard and fast, then pulled me up. Lorenzo! Change of plans. We're going live. Within minutes, we stood in the shattered study, glass crunching underfoot, smoke drifting through broken windows, the sounds of gunfire still echoing outside. But Lorenzo's team had secured the perimeter, pushing Vincent's men back, creating a bubble of relative safety, and in that bubble, surrounded by destruction, I faced a camera phone live streaming to millions of viewers. My name is Arya Romano. I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. 20 years ago, Vincent Castellano ordered my entire family murdered. He killed my mother, my siblings, and tried to kill me. I survived because a woman named Maria loved me more than she feared death. I gestured to the destruction around us. This is his response to the truth. More violence, more death. More proof that powerful men think they're above accountability. The camera phone's viewer count climbed into the hundreds of thousands. But I'm not afraid of Vincent Castellano, I continued. Because I have something he doesn't. I have truth on my side. I have people who stand with me not out of fear, but out of belief that this world can be better than the one he's built, and I have a future that doesn't depend on burying the past in blood and lies. Movement at the doorway. Dante tensed, weapon rising, but it was Isabella who appeared, still in clothes from yesterday, her hair disheveled, her eyes wild with something between terror and hope. Isabella. I moved toward Vincent's wife, my cousin, before anyone could stop me. What are you doing here? I saw the recording. Her voice shook. I heard Vincent's confession, and I realized. She looked at the camera, then back to me. I realized I've been a prisoner in my own marriage. My family sold me to a monster, and I've spent 2 years pretending that was love. But it's not. It never was. Vincent will kill you for this. I said quietly. Maybe. She straightened her shoulders. But I'd rather die free than live as his trophy for one more day. She turned to face the camera directly. Vincent Castellano is a monster. He murdered the Romanos. He's beaten me. He's threatened to kill my remaining family if I ever tried to leave. And he's done all of this while pretending to be a respectable businessman, a devoted husband, a pillar of our community. Her testimony, combined with mine, sent the viewer count into the millions. And somewhere across the city, Vincent Castellano watched his world burn. The livestream ended when federal agents arrived, drawn by the gunfire, the media coverage, the impossible, to ignore evidence of violence and confession. They took statements, secured the scene, and for the first time in decades, powerful men in expensive suits looked nervous, because the rules had changed. Truth had become a weapon, and we'd just proven it could cut deeper than any bullet. Later, after the agents left and the media dispersed and the adrenaline finally faded, I found myself back on the terrace, where this had all started just 2 days before. Dante joined me silently, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders against the night chill. We stood together watching the city lights flicker in the distance, millions of lives unaware that their world had shifted on its axis. Vincent's in custody, Dante said quietly. Facing charges for the fire, for tonight's attack, for everything Isabella and the recordings revealed. His family has distanced themselves. His allies have scattered. It's over, area. You won. I corrected. All of us. Together. He echoed, pulling me closer. I could get used to that. Good. I leaned into his warmth. Because I'm not done yet. He tensed slightly. What do you mean? I mean the Romanos have territory, businesses, resources that have been sitting dormant for 20 years while other families fought over scraps. I turned to face him fully. I want to rebuild. Not the old empire, something new, something better, businesses that don't depend on violence, investments in communities instead of exploitation, a legacy that my mother and siblings would be proud of instead of ashamed of. He searched for words, that's revolutionary, and impossible. And completely insane. Probably, I smiled. Will you help me anyway? Area, if you're asking me to turn legitimate, to walk away from everything I've built, I'm asking you to build something better, with me, as equals. I took his hands in mine. I know it won't be easy, I know people will resist. But Dante, we just took down Vincent Castellano with nothing but truth and courage. If we can do that, we can do anything. He stared at me for a long moment, emotions warring across his face, doubt, hope, fear, and something that looked like wonder. Then slowly, he smiled. You're gonna change the world, aren't you? I'm gonna try. I rose on my toes, pressing my lips to his. And you're gonna help me. Am I? His arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against him. Les. I kissed him again, deeper this time, tasting the promise of tomorrow on his lips. Because you love me. And because somewhere under all that darkness, you're still the man I fell in love with, the one who sees good even when it's hard. The one who protects people instead of using them. The one who believes that tomorrow can be better than today. I love you, he whispered against my mouth. God, Area, I love you so much it terrifies me. Good. I smiled into the kiss. Be terrified with, be brave with me. Be whatever we need to be together. And there, under the stars, we sealed our future with kisses that tasted like hope and danger and impossible, beautiful possibility, because we'd survived the storm. Now we got to decide what to build in its aftermath. 6 months later, the Romano estate rose from renovated foundations like a phoenix from ash. Not the dark fortress it had once been, but something brighter, solar panels on the roof, gardens replacing guard towers, community centers occupying spaces that used to house weapons. A new legacy built on the bones of the old. I stood in what used to be Lorenzo's war room and was now a conference space, reviewing proposals for the next phase of development. Education programs, small business loans, legitimate investments that served communities instead of exploiting them. Revolutionary, impossible, insane, and somehow working. The Henderson Project is ready for your signature. Dante appeared in the doorway, looking unfairly good in the charcoal suit he'd adopted as his new uniform. Businessman instead of crime lord, though the danger still lurked beneath the surface. Some things didn't change entirely. How are the numbers? I asked, scanning the document he handed me. Better than projected. Turns out when you invest in people instead of bleeding them dry, they're pretty eager to make things succeed. He moved behind me, his hands finding my shoulders, thumbs working at the tension there. You're changing things, Area. Slowly. But meaningfully. We're changing things. I corrected for the 1000th time. I couldn't do any of this without you. Debatable. His breath warmed my ear. But I'll accept the compliment if it means you'll take a break. You've been at this for 14 hours. There's so much to do. There will always be more to do. He spun my chair around, kneeling so we were eye level. But right now, there's also dinner getting cold, and a very expensive bottle of wine I've been saving for a special occasion, and a man who would very much like to spend the evening with the woman he loves instead of watching her work herself to death. I touched his face, marveling at how familiar this had become. Dante kneeling before me, vulnerable and strong simultaneously. What's the special occasion? His smile turned mysterious. Come to dinner and find out. Curiosity won over productivity. I let him lead me through the renovated estate to the terrace where we'd shared our first real conversation after the truth had come out. Candles flickered in the twilight. Music played softly, and a table for two waited with enough food to feed an army. Dante, this is... I stopped, noticing the small black box beside my plate. What is that? Dinner first, he insisted, pulling out my chair. I want to do this right. We ate slowly, talking about projects and plans and the mundane details of building something real from the wreckage of the past. Lorenzo stopped by briefly to steal a roll and wink at me knowingly before disappearing. Sophia passed through long enough to fuss over whether I'd been eating enough. It felt like family. Real family. The kind built on choice instead of blood. Finally, as dessert disappeared and the wine bottle emptied, Dante stood and retrieved the box. 6 months ago, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, I met a woman who was so much more than she appeared. Who saw through my darkness to something worth saving. Who changed my entire world with nothing but courage and impossible faith in tomorrow. My heart started racing. I've done terrible things, Arya. I've hurt people. Made choices I can never take back. But every day since you came into my life, I've tried to be better. Not for redemption, I don't deserve that. But because you made me believe that who I am tomorrow matters more than who I was yesterday. He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the candlelight, simple, elegant, with a single stone that gleamed like captured starlight. Marry me, he said simply. Not because it makes sense or because our families expect it, or because it would be strategic for our businesses. Marry me because I love you, because I want to build tomorrow with you. Because you're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of the chance you gave me. Tears blurred my vision. Dante, I know it's complicated, he continued quickly. I know there are still threats out there, people who want to drag us back into the old ways. I know legitimacy is a journey, not a destination, and I'll probably make mistakes. But Arya, I swear to you, I will never lie to you again. I will never make decisions for you instead of with you. I will be your partner, your equal, your safe place to land when the world gets too heavy. Les. The word escaped before he'd even finished. Yes, Dante. Of course, yes. His expression transformed, surprise and joy and relief all colliding. He slid the ring onto my finger with shaking hands, then pulled me into his arms and kissed me like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. I love you, he whispered against my lips. I love you, Arya Romano, my salvation, my future, my everything. I love you too, I said through happy tears, my partner, my choice, my home. And there, on the terrace where everything had changed 6 months before, we held each other as the city lights flickered, and the future spread out before us like an unwritten book. Lorenzo found us later, still wrapped around each other, the ring glinting between us. About damn time, he said gruffly, though his eyes were suspiciously bright. Your mother would have liked him, Kara. She always did have a thing for dangerous men with hidden hearts. Tell me about her, I said, as I had 100 times since that first night. Tell me about all of them. And as Dante held me and Lorenzo spoke of ghosts turned memories, I realized something profoundly. The past couldn't be changed. The pain couldn't be erased. The years stolen couldn't be recovered. But the future, the glorious, terrifying, beautiful future, was ours to create. We'd been forged in fire and blood and impossible choices. We'd survived truth and consequences and the weight of legacy. And now, together, we would build something worth surviving for. Not revenge, not power, but love, justice, hope, and the kind of empire that didn't require anyone to die for it to thrive. To tomorrow, I said, raising my wine glass. To tomorrow, Dante and Lorenzo echoed. We drank to futures and second chances and the revolutionary idea that broken people could build beautiful things if they just had courage enough to try. And somewhere in the city below, Vincent Castellano sat in a cell, his empire dust, his power gone. Justice, delayed but undeniable, had finally come, and in its wake we'd found something even more powerful, the chance to begin again. Together, always together.